Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We certainly have a great personality, and we're going to have a lot of perspectives very shortly. Before we officially start the program and introduce our guest, we have a young fellow man about town, Mr. Jeff Ladd. Had a lot to do with tourism and vitally involved in working on a place there out by the State School and Colony, which was what we used to call it, politically incorrect as we were. Anyway, Jeff Ladd. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Bill.
I can't hear you very well. Maybe it's my hearing aids.
Well, good morning, Bill.
I hear much better. That's fine. You're coming in 5 by 5.
All right. It's my rotary dial phone that's the problem.
All right, sir. You wish to talk about, go right ahead. We give you the baton.
Well, thank you. A couple big announcements. This Saturday is Route 66 Day in Lincoln, and weather permitting, which is a big question mark, we are going to have a parade from historic downtown Lincoln, which is now signed for Route 66, and that parade will travel down to the mill for a ribbon cutting at noon, and you're all invited. And it will be the grand opening of the mill as a Route 66 museum. So we're very excited about that. And also Saturday is a bike blessing hosted by Ron and Lois Thornton at Zero Tolerance, where the motorcycling public can come and get their bike blessed for the travel season. So we're working with them. And we're excited about that. We have reached out to the governor's office, and we have invited the governor to the events of the day. We are still waiting to hear from them, and we're hoping they will attend. So if you have the governor's ear, give him a call on our behalf, Bill.
Well, hopefully he might show up. You know, as we all know, he's a bike guy and loves to ride, much to the consternation of his people who are looking after his well-being. But he enjoys that very much. Well, Jeff, what time do the proceedings begin out there?
The parade lines up at 10:30 and starts at 11. The ribbon cutting is at noon, and the mill will be open from noon to 4. And one other quick thing I wanted to announce today, Bill and Judy, Jim, come on out at 10 a.m. to the mill this morning. We have a very special presentation we are making with Lincoln Christian Church. This is a real stunning development that has happened, and Sarah Watson from Looking for Lincoln's going to be there. Bill Kelly from Illinois Route 66 Scenic Byway. A real stunner. You'll get to find out what that is when you come out to the mill at 10 a.m. today. Very morning, Wednesday. It's going to be a little tough for Judy and Dennis and I to make that. We all have a tight schedule. We'll see what I'd like to see. Kelly, I ran across him some time ago. It turns out he's a fraternity brother of mine. Many years later. But nonetheless, I'd like to say hello to him. Thank you very much, Jeff. We wish you well. You've done the yeoman's job on this mill thing. We hope that's a huge success. Well, thank you, and this development today will be a big news item, and I'm sure you'll be really thrilled when you hear about it. So thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Jeff Ladd.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, that was very nice.
Piqued my curiosity.
Yeah, so we'll just have to hurry, that's all. All right, Judith Kay. Yes. As you might remember, and I think Doctor might remember, he's been with us before, and we're happy to have him back. We always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. Today we have two. Let's start first with a young lady from Lincoln who ran the Boston Marathon. That's a big deal. Abby Coors noted that she went out there and completed her run in reasonably good time, and she was very happy about that. And anybody that would run from here to Beeson twice a day, or a double round trip, I should say. I guess that equates to twice a day, doesn't it? something like that.
Not necessarily, but I'll
Anyway,
go with it. I mean, it's good by me.
A young lady did part of her training by running a round trip to Beeson on a daily basis, I guess. So that's kind of a formidable deal. So
And what did she do when she got to Beeson?
she went to the local Holiday Inn there and got her room. There's a story about that, which we won't go into in any event. And the other kudo, and this kind of comes from the heart, as the guy says in country radio, from the heart. The Lincoln College Board of Trustees at some point in time made a decision that Creekside was fine, but we needed to really dedicate Creekside to a fellow by the name of Dr. G. Dennis Campbell. And we had that ceremony. Wind about blew us away up there Saturday morning, but and we had a lot of folks up there, vendors, to try to tell us and explain to us about the nature here in Central Illinois. Wind blew them all away. So kudos to the trustees for deciding that we would name that the Dr. G. Dennis Campbell Environmental Center. And welcome to Dr. Campbell this morning, sir.
Hey, Bill and Judy and Jim. Bill is poking me because it's a bit of an embarrassment that the college would make that decision.
That, and I know that.
I know it.
Why do you say that?
Oh,
well, that's Dennis Campbell. That's why he says that.
No, it's not. Because the Creekside is a community affair. It's family. So Lincoln College family, my family, but the community's family. There's so many people. I mean, I just love the idea of the mill being opened, and because the people that the community that supports that also supports Creekside. So this is a community that should be recognized. Putting my name on it is kind of depressive to me. I want to thank the president, Dr. Gerlach, David Gerlach, our president of the college, and the board. And I know Bill is an alumnus of that board and alumnus of Lincoln College, and but I think it kind of works against me. There are fine people out there that need to have their name on Creekside. In fact, I'm thinking about finding this new sign that Bill's talking about and putting your name here across my name, and then inviting other people to come in, and we'll have honorary names every day that we could put up there.
Well, now you're harking back to when they were looking for this branding for Lincoln.
Yes.
And you know, we've got Abraham Lincoln. That's pretty good branding, I'd say.
I always thought so.
And
Yes.
and we've got Route 66 that we were just talking about a moment ago. That's pretty decent branding. I don't know why we have to hire somebody to tell us what to do. And now we've got formerly Creekside, now
I thought
Dr.
I think that was Dr. Pam Riardi's idea. That's the term Creekside, was it not?
You're absolutely right.
And I thought that was very neat. That was
Jim
very neat.
Moriarty's daughter did a marketing strategy for Creekside after this. We had batted that back and forth about 7-8 years ago, and she was marvelous in coming up with that.
Yeah,
I think she used her lawyer brother to double check some copywriting for the name, and
that was her lawyer son.
Lawyer son.
Yeah.
Okay. And double checking on those things. That it was just when people come out to the property, which I certainly invite. I tell people it's 4 miles north of our campus, due north. So if you just draw a line there and you'll get to Sugar Creek, you should be able to find it. But when you come out there, I tell people don't hang around the parking lot because it's Creekside. Let's get to the creek.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, of course, Pete Frederick's happily made sure we got that log cabin out there.
Well, see, now we're talking about community. And you know, there's Bill is about to say Pete Fredericks. He won't bring up the Bill and Jean Gossett Prairie, but there are local names there that are just very important.
Well, I turned over a flower or two, and Dennis got generous and named it.
Do you remember that? It was about 10 years ago.
That was a lot of fun.
I say Bill and I were out there planting flowers, and we invited other people, and we ended up with a beautiful tall grass prairie out there.
Works very nice. Doctor,
while we're mentioning the creek, let's have Dennis tell us what your student found in the creek.
Well, again, maybe we should rename it the Judd McCullum Creekside, because, yes, I'm very proud of Judd, and I got to see him again just a couple of days ago.
I thought that was very nice that he made the trip to come down here Saturday.
Yeah. He's such a great person.
Oh, he's a good kid. Making an unusual living.
He does.
That's very. Just kind of touch briefly on what that young man's doing, Dennis.
Well, I was trying to, and so local scientists were trying to direct his enthusiasm for the outdoors, natural resources, paleontology, and wildlife.
Snake handling.
Snake handling. But he found a job that pays more money, and that is reclamation of barn woods. He's in a company that travels all over, probably all over the country, but he specializes in this neck of the woods, where he repurposes and finds old wood. Maybe we've all seen them in restaurants. Yes. That they can make great decorations, but you can he repurposes old barns and old woods, so he can get out
right now.
But Bill is talking about Judd back when, in fact, I have to make a distinction between Judd the student and Judd the woolly mammoth, because he discovered during one of my labs the world's largest woolly mammoth. So all bone pieces that we've gotten out of the creek, from the teeth, which are the tusks and upper jaw, and parts of the skull, are bigger than any woolly mammoth has ever been recorded. And when we had it carbon dated in New Zealand, which is a former home of mine, that we found out it was one of the last woolly mammoths on Earth. So we throw a lot of superlatives. Judd is a great guy, but Judd the mammoth also is pretty interesting too. Large
and what era do they think this woolly mammoth trod the woods?
Well, it would be the end of the Pleistocene, just the beginning of when Native American Indians are coming into North America. So about 12,500 years ago, this woolly mammoth is hanging out not by a glacier. I get all my science from the Ice Age movie, but several sequels keep adding science to my life. But we used to think the textbook was that a woolly mammoth hung around a glacial front. Well, the glacial front 12,500 years ago was up near Chicago. It's pretty cold. And this one was, 300 miles away, and living, and then dying as well. But it was hanging on, the last of the species, and it was probably one of the last generations of woolly mammoths in North America, hanging out in our forest. This would have been an ash spruce forest instead of just the savanna type of grasslands that we always thought woolly mammoths hung out in.
Now, how far? I thought that the glaciers came almost to this.
They did, and they brought woolly mammoths with them as well. But then they started retreating, and we thought the mammoths might have followed generation after generation, not literally walking with the glacial, because when we say glacial speed, we mean slow. Yes. And so this is retreating back into Canada and ultimately back up to the North Pole area, where we have glacial ice sitting on top of water. We can't call it a glacier because glacial ice is ice on land, but we have ice fields up there. Well, the mammoths should have been going with it or dying. Well, the science, Judd the woolly mammoth is rewriting textbooks, saying that they hung out and stayed in little refuges as the glacial left, and they tried to hang on for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Doctor, would Elkhart Hill be glacially spawned?
That wasn't the last glacier. The last glacier stopped pretty much where we're sitting right now, between Atlanta and Lincoln. And the Elkhart Hill is a glacial form. The glacier prior to that, which is the Wisconsinian, I'm sorry, the Illinoisan. The one The last one was the Wisconsin, and then the Illinois was prior to that. Illinois went all the way down to the Shawnee Hills. Now, it's really fun to talk to scientists. I always tell my students I'm a bit of a pretender. I pretend I know science because I get science from the scientists and then relate it to students. But the glacial hill of Elkhart, we use the word kame, K-A-M-E, which tends to be a fill of say a crevice of crack, and a glacial thickness of about a mile would have a lot of debris accumulating in that, and it falls down, and then when the glacier melts, it just drops that material straight to the ground. And we believe Elkhart Hill was like that. It's a mixture of different sizes of rock and debris, so it wasn't carried by water. It had been carried by the ice and dropped right there. Oh yeah, there's a great area of Illinois to be in.
I almost said, Judith and Jim, of a scientist, because when I was in college, I took Geology 101 so I wouldn't have to take chemistry.
Well, yeah. So
that's about as close as I got.
People make fun of geology. I found it kind of later in my life. As a biologist, I started caring about the landscape around Oregon. Fauna and flora, and that landscape is mainly geology, and what fun it is to combine the two.
Doctors had such a... Go ahead, Judith K.,
well,
please.
I hate to get stuck in a rut, but that's my middle name. I'd just like to ask one more question about Judd, if I may.
Oh, please.
Okay, so when he stepped on this in the creek, how did he know it wasn't just a stone? Did you tell him it's not just a stone?
Well, now I'm pretending again. You know what you need? You need Judd sitting here. Judd was in a class. Now, he had been to this creek bed 2 days earlier. You need to pick it. He was a freshman student at Lincoln College. On a Saturday, I do freshwater mussel clam studies. Mm-hmm. I'm actually trained in cave biology. There's no caves around here, so I started doing work in creeks, according to Illinois State Museum.
Caves, but we do have a hill.
Oh yes,
so that's something.
All kind of fun things, geology. But so Judd was working on a freshwater mussel study a couple of days earlier with other students, and when they went home, he liked to hang out, and so we walked down the creek, and I told him that, Judd, we're going to come to this gravel bar here in the creek, Sugar Creek, Logan County Sugar Creek, and that'll be in 2 days in our environmental biology lab. And I started telling him about because it's a neat creek. You can see a layer of gravel. I call it the Pleistocene gravel. That you can get bits and pieces of Pleistocene animals. Now, I'm thinking about chunks as big as your fist being the biggest, not as big as a car. But so I was telling him that it'll be an exciting day. 2 days. Look forward to the lab. Well, 2 days later, we're in a lab with 24 students. Broke up into 2 teams. Everybody had responsibilities. Boring things like doing chemistry, measuring water flow. Judd puts on waders, immediately goes out there to do the polywogging, we call it, looking for live freshwater mussels, which legally we leave there. We don't remove them, but we identify them. And he stumbles across, while polywogging for freshwater mussels, pulls up a chunk. Now, regretfully, at times like this, I look over there and see a student not really doing his job. He's holding up something, so I think I said, put down that, and he reminded me that I said old tire or something like that. I don't remember the occasion, but I remember being embarrassed when I finally focused on it and realized that it wasn't a log or a tire. It was a piece of a tusk. And so it's remarkable that a young student, and the water's up 2 feet, so you can't even see this underwater. So all of this was tactile. He had followed along it, realized it was smooth, realized that it had a broken tip, wasn't anything like logs. picked it up, and we found 3 other pieces, and they ultimately fit together to be 13 feet in length, and we found pieces of another tusk. Well, you don't find mammoth tusk. If you can go back to the Ice Age movies, Manny is not walking around with a 13-foot tusk on. So it just led to a wonderful science. We determined it was a mammoth. A couple of months later, I was out there stumbling around the day after Christmas. Not sure what you do the day after Christmas, but I tried to get away from my family. But and all of the packing and back in my Australian days, it was known as Boxing Day. So I was out there in the creek, breaking through ice, and stumbled across more of the Judd the mammoth. In fact, I wasn't going to reach down. I said, I got these waders. If I reach down there, I'm going to get cold water in my waders. I had a cold to begin with, but I said, what would Judd do? Well, he'd reach down and pull out an elephant. And so I reached down and pulled out the upper jaw of the mammoth, and it now told us it was a male, told us how old it was. It told us it was Mammuthus primigenius, which is the scientific name for a woolly mammoth. There were other mammoths at the time in this area. Long story, but this is all hearsay now with your audience, because they need to hear it straight from Judd. He probably has a different take on it.
But I think it's such a fascinating story. It's just how things can happen in your life that end up being so important.
Serendipity is a big part of science. In fact, one of the creative traits. I actually helped form a talented and gifted high school in Dallas, which was in the last 25 years, 17 of it was the #1 high school in the nation. But this talented and gifted high school had traits and up and down the hallways of this high school, and one of them is taking advantage of chance. And so here is you stumble over something, and you just you learn about it.
You know, Judith, you and I know, many in our audience who know Dr. Campbell, we have a Texas boy here.
Yes.
You can tell by my accent.
How lucky it is for Lincoln and Lincoln College students that Dr. Dennis Campbell found his way here to Lincoln College by way of Australia. And I wanted to kind of talk about that. Dr. Campbell spent 7 years down there, for goodness sakes. They almost made an Aussie out of him.
Oh, no, not with this accent. They got really tired. They
so, Doctor, how did you go to, besides flying, I mean, what took you to Australia for a 7-year career down there, sir?
Well, again, different perspectives. I had a bachelor's degree. I was drafted into the Army, reluctant soldier, came back, quickly wanted to finish a master's degree, find a job in biology and some aspect of geology. I was a cave biologist working in Carlsbad and some other things. So I just was almost fickled life through me, a couple of things that I wasn't prepared for. And then out of the blue, the Labor government of Australia versus the social government of Australia decided to invite scientists around the world to come to Australia to do similar work of what they see in their publications. So apparently I've been doing some work that some scientists in Australia were interested in, some cave ecology work, and they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, which was a permanent resident visa, didn't have to change citizenship, but
had money in
a green card.
Had money in it.
I had money in it. It was a car, a house, a job. I could work on a PhD if I wanted to, teaching at the. So
well, that's nothing to sneeze at.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
We have a money objective here too. We're going to have to interrupt Dr. Campbell for just a second.
Good. Because
we're going to morph into what is known as the capitalistic system of having sponsors. So go right ahead, James. Right back live in the studios at WLCN 96.3. We have a delightful guest this morning, one we've been looking forward to enjoying, Dr. G. Dennis Campbell, Professor Emeritus at Lincoln College, but still hanging in there, has an office there, still operating at Lincoln College, and we're happy about that. You're just not actively teaching students.
Oh, And I'll correct you a little bit there. The emeritus status will have to be voted on by board members.
Well, I just declared it.
Yeah, I know, and you carry a lot of weight, and I appreciate it. So personally, I appreciate that. But as a good friend of mine, Joe Baker, says that why would you even need more accolades? Why don't you just retire quietly? I can't do that. I enjoy Creekside, so they gave me a part-time, as Forrest Gump would say, they found me a fine job. and that fine job is I love the title of caretaker of Creekside.
Your foray into science kind of started with your interest in caves, isn't that right?
Yes. Well, caving was in Australia is down under. In fact, we hide my first name. I even had somebody at the dedication ceremony ask me what my first name was. The G stands for.
Is it a secret?
Well, you and don't tell anybody.
Okay, pinky swear.
So I'm going to whisper. It stands for Glenn. Now, Glenn Campbell from Texas. Well, he's from Arkansas, Delight, Arkansas. But Glenn Campbell name in Texas back in my high school day was, "The singer has your name, Glenn." And then all of a sudden I went to college and everybody's saying, "You have a singer's name." Oh. And so when I went to Australia, I was actually known as, and this is silly, Texan coming to Australia, working in caves. I was known as the Limestone Cowboy.
Oh, God!
Not rhinestone, but limestone cowboy.
I love that.
So
that's a good line.
Was still, when they paged me in an airport, everybody was ready to see the real Glenn Campbell. So I went to my middle name after getting a PhD there. But caves in Australia really go together. Most of Australia is underlined in limestone, and I was doing research with animals there, and it was perfect. Also New Zealand, New Guinea, and any exotic place I could pretend to know something about caves, I would go to.
Bats live in caves, or in my attic.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. After my house fire, I had quite a bat problem for quite a while, and people are so skittish about bats, and they mustn't be, right?
Well, beast.
I mean, if you're not afraid of getting rabies, don't be afraid of the bats.
That's right. In fact, that's a good point. They are such beneficial organisms in life in general, not just in the cave, but outside of the cave as well. We've heard stories about eating their weight in insects, not as much as mosquitoes as most people say. They're mainly moth eaters, but they pollinate plants, many bats that are more of the fruit bats. So one should not be afraid of bats. We should be thanking them. So they are very beneficial to our society. But here in North America, as opposed to Australia, we do have a virus called rabies. And I learned as an early cave biologist that maybe up to 1% in some populations, not most populations, but in some populations, up to 1% might have rabies. It's usually not the bats that you would be studying. It's those that are sick and they're away from it, so we don't pick up bats that you can actually pick up. We like bats that you can't get to, that are flying around and you're working with. Australia doesn't have rabies. That's why they have a quarantine on dogs.
They do
not.
Interesting.
Do not. They've been very good at keeping the virus of rabies out of that country by having strict quarantine.
What's this quarantine on dogs business?
Well, if you were from North America and you were going to carry a pet, you were going to move there, you would have to have them quarantined there and observed to make sure they did not bring in rabies.
Right.
So you were a little bit more cavalier there in Australia working with bats. In fact, we were told not to use gloves because the teeth of the bats would rip your gloves and you can't use them for other things. So, but been bitten many times, and I'm the one who's initiating it, so I don't blame the bat. And they're not really bad. I've worked with vampires in Mexico too, and some of them might have had rabies, but you just learn to be a little bit more careful when you're working with bats. But it's again, I'm pretending. I'm not the world's bat expert. I work with guano ecosystems, which is their excrement. And so I tell my students that once crawling in a cave, I scoop some ground soil into my mouth and spit it out, and I realize, well, it's bat excrement. So when I'm in a restaurant, my fork...
Have you all eaten breakfast out there this morning?
Well, when I'm in a restaurant and my fork hits the floor, it doesn't bother me anymore because I've eaten bat excrement. But so everything else relatively is minor. But I like the other smaller things that are part of the ecosystem than just the bats. The sexiness of saying you work with bats is not really defined what kind of work I do. Energetics and physiology of smaller things, cave crickets. And
aren't there just an awful lot of insects that live in and on this guano?
Very good. That's exactly right. It does. Typically, you have decayed vegetation or live vegetation as the beginning of a food chain. Inside of a cave, you don't have live vegetation. You do have some decaying washed in, but the excrement of bats and other animals serve as foundation for fungus, and fungus serves as the food for certain small insects or other critters, and then things that feed on those. So the entire cave ecosystem often is based on when you walk into a bat cave, you're walking on probably 20 or 30 feet thick of bat excrement. For thousands of years, bats hanging overhead has dropped this material and it accumulates.
648-5510. Somebody must surely have questions of Dr. Campbell about bat poop.
And don't worry about interrupting me because I'm being terribly rude today. Just
no. You own 50% of this program. You go right ahead.
Oh dear.
Let's in our contract.
Let's talk about the environmental center.
Okay.
I think that's why you came, Dennis. You poor soul. And here I've just led you astray.
4 miles north, Sugar Creek, north of Lincoln, Sugar Creek. Wonderful scientific studies. Wonderful, just a beautiful area.
By the way, the public is invited to come in and visit with you out there, and we should
not
say
invited. They're
it's
encouraged.
Just those who know Bell Station, which is a curve going 121 going to Old Hartsburg. You go right straight north on that curve, approximately a mile or less than that. And there's I can't remember the county road it's on.
2000 north.
2000 north. Then you go along down and you see a small sign that says Small Edwards Trace.
Yes.
And turn left, and there you are, up about a 3/4.5 mile lane. And it's a really neat place. Describe what you put up there, Dr. Campbell.
Well, again, it's out of the way because there was an agricultural barn used by the tenants of this Lincoln College property that farming that, and wonderful people, the Clock and Gay. So just marvelous folks, Alvin and Chris. But everybody there, because our neighbor is Shirley Edwards. The entry road is that her maiden name is Small, and some of us know about Edwards Trace being an Indian trail from St. Louis to Peoria that's just about a mile over and crosses Sugar Creek. Well, we call this the Small Edwards Trace to honor her. But we now have a parking lot. It's gravel, but accommodates 35 or so cars. Bioswales, which are ditches for collecting water off the parking lot that lead to a retention pond in the parking lot. But the big three is I consider it a nice pavilion. You can get under, have a picnic underneath it. We have a greenhouse. We have an insectarium, the Rotary Insectarium. The Rotarians of both Lincoln and Atlanta have been just marvelous in helping me sweat equity of put in building this, but also gave some money. We have the Gossett Tallgrass Prairie, a beautiful area of original. If you wanted to see what Illinois was like back in the 1800s, the Tallgrass will show it. We got new grants from the Illinois Native Plant Society. Central Chapter has helped us put in a pollinator garden. Wild Ones, the Prairie Chapter out of Bloomington, is helping on an ethnobotanical woodland garden, which means what did Native American Indians use plants for? Well, we're growing woodland plants, trying to rustle it out of some invasive plants in the woods to grow there. We have wonderful trails that lead to the creek, in fact, all the way up to the Judd Find, the discovery site of the world's largest woolly mammoth, which is about a mile away, but a beautiful trail that gets there. I'm sure I'm forgetting all the other parts.
Well, there's a really very substantial and a surprising
the log
amount of
cabin,
things.
Pete's Frederick's log cabin was
Yes.
taken out there, and Peoples of the Past board. I'm sorry interrupting, Bill,
No,
but I
no,
just
no,
thought I need to
I
publicly
wanted
come
everybody
out
to know there's so much up there.
Yeah, to walk back in the past. I call it forward to the past instead of back to the future. But forward to the past, every foot you walk along our boardwalk, which we're trying to develop. So we need a little bit of financial help there to go across the little tributary stream and go along three-dimensional.
We want to repeat that. We could use some financial help there. And if you send a check to Lincoln College to Debbie Ackerman, I'm sure, and mark it accordingly, I'm sure that Dr. Campbell will be forever in your debt.
Well, I'm in the debt of everybody already, but the general public will have great time seeing reconstructed shelters for the Pete's log cabin is already there, and we're trying to furnish it into pioneer times. But we have a Kickapoo Indian shelter that is going up, and Mississippian Indian culture shelter. So the Peoples of the Past Boardwalk allows us to get an idea of timeline.
Yeah, a lot of Rotarians spent some time on their hands and knees putting that boardwalk in.
They have.
I understood that when the first pioneers came here, they had a terrible time breaking up the ground. Was it all the roots from all these prairie grasses that were here? What was the deal?
You have a great grasp of that situation, because prior to the self-cleaning, self-scouring steel plow that John Deere, Illinois boy, invented, he didn't invent steel plows, didn't invent plows, but it was a self-cleaning, self-scouring steel plow. People would refer to the ground as hard as concrete, and as sod is soiled, held tightly by grasses. And so when you see cowboy movies and the gentle pioneer family has the cowboys ride up and get off our land, use sod busters. Well, busting sod was hard to do, and that would require that opened the door for agriculture. So we like people to now. I'm afraid we've lost all but less than 0.1% of our prairies are gone. It is ridiculous of what we've done to a natural habitat, but for good reason. I like to eat. Agriculture, farmland has been very good to Illinois, but it's at the expense of natural communities, and this sod prairie type of land was in fact, my understanding is that wagons would come across and refer to it as an ocean, because they could just barely see over the tall grass prairie, and they couldn't do anything with the ground itself.
You know, you stop and think back to that era and how tough, in capital letters all the way through, those folks were to take off and head west. Not a clue as to whether they're going to be by that sundown or when the sun would come up the next time for them. Those were tough people.
I equate it to coming across an ocean in a boat. You can't really just get off your boat and enjoy the ocean water. You couldn't do that with your wagons going across the prairie. And you got people throwing spears at you, too, along the way. Or you got to find food, so you got to learn how to hunt in an area that you don't know the local wildlife.
Oofta, that was not the good old days, was it? I like my washer and dryer.
Well, you know, I saw a thing recently. One of the saving graces of television at PBS and the documentaries and so forth. And I saw one just recently on the Dust Bowl and the Depression.
The dirty 30s.
Oh, my goodness gracious. See, these poor folks pack everything they owned on top of a car and rattle off, or a wagon, and rattle off into the God knows where the next day. I equated them to the pioneers when they opened that country up.
Yes. Well, it reminds me of Texas Tech and Panhandle of Texas and Lubbock, we would have dust storms that'll come through there, but not every day. And your whole life had to be around. Quite remarkable people. We talk about the greatest generation being World War II, but prior to that, the greatest Americans being able to wrestle a life out of a really hostile environment occasionally in the United States.
Dr. Campbell, you mentioned being in New Guinea.
Oh, yes.
What took you?
I still have my head.
Science.
Yes, I see that.
Science took you to New Guinea, but what particularly was an attractive thing to bring you to
well,
it's really off the beaten path.
It is. It's a cave area, and at the time, in addition to being a professional cave biologist, I was also a spelunker, which is a cave hobbyist.
Yeah.
So you like to, and we were looking for the deepest cave in the world, and so the southern highlands of New Guinea, right at the border between Papua and New Guinea, those are the two states that make up New Guinea, had the potential. It was the river Atia emptied into the ground and disappeared, and so it was cave expeditions. Once we got there and worked for a couple of months, I then was hired by the government to the Conservator of Fauna wanted me to curate the collections of all biology groups that were going through New Guinea and finding. Again, it was sad to think that much of the wildlife was being recorded and going to other museums, so the country of New Guinea wanted to establish a museum situation where they would try to maintain their own natural heritage there, and I was just hired to work with them on developing that. Found a new tree kangaroo, found all kinds of animals that were new in the forest there that had never been recorded, so it was fun, a part of my life. I'm not a collector anymore. I kind of don't appreciate killing things to learn more about them. I know that that's almost the first stage you have to do in a collection, but I don't do that anymore.
You know, Doctor mentioned the government of New Guinea. You think of New Guinea, and you think of people running around with not much on. And, and a plug,
and a bone in your nose.
And a bone in their nose, a plug in their lips.
Now, when I got off the airplane, it was pouring with rain, and I said, wait a minute, this is the first time I went there. This is supposed to be the dry season. And they said, yes, it is the dry season, because it's going to stop sometime during the day for an hour. Wet season doesn't stop.
It doesn't
It
stop.
will rain every hour.
Yeah.
So dry season is a relative term.
Our guest this morning has been Dr. Dennis Campbell. We appreciate your taking your time out. Still a busy schedule, Dennis. We always try to close Viewpoint with... we have a call. Stand by, folks. We have a call. Here's a set for you.
Oh, and, Dennis, you'll want to
good.
listen.
We appreciate that call. All right. Go right ahead, caller.
How you doing? My name's TJ. I was just listening. I'm driving truck. I just want to know what the hours are after that place. I've never been there. I've heard about the woolly mammoth, but if you guys could give me the hours, that'd be great.
I'd love for you to drop by, because we say on the brochure dawn to dusk, but we never close a gate. I enjoy the center after sundown. We got a barbecue pit out there, a council ring that my grandson and I put a couple of years ago. We like star nights, so I would say come at any time, day or night. But at night, expect the local sheriff department to drive up that lane. Just holler at them. Campbell invited me, and they love to hear that. If you run to the forest, then they're perturbed. so hang it, please. And once you get there, because you're such a brave soul of going down a lane and seeing something new, tell everybody you now own that property. And I know the college doesn't like for me saying this. You just can't sell it, but take ownership. Tell other people about it, and tell them that you found this marvelous place to get away from everyone.
Right. Well,
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I definitely will come out and visit. Me and my wife would love something like that.
And if you contact the college, we can get you brochures on how to get there.
Awesome. I'm actually from Lincoln. I've lived in Lincoln all my life. I have an idea where it's at.
You know Bell Station then.
Yep.
Nicholson Road will get you there too.
Sure do.
All right. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it very much.
Listen, man, very interesting stuff. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And ran the clock out, unfortunately. I always try to come up with a comment or two at the end of the program that's hopefully analogous to the program of the day. And a fellow by the name of Aristotle wrote this.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, that was Sam Aristotle.
Okay.
And he said, old Aristotle said, in all things of nature, there is something of the marvelous. And I think that about says it. Dr. Campbell has found something of the marvelous in all of his professional activities, and we appreciate your being with us this morning, Dennis.
Oh, it's a great joy to be with both of you today.
Thank you, sir.